Hello there, welcome to Genesis Models. My name is Bob Waldron and welcome to episode 4 of the Avenger build. Now in this episode we're going to be taking care of doing some things like we have stuff like chipping going on here. We have using washes, you know, this is going to be one where we use some Humbrol washes for a change, as well as, you know, getting our instrument display panel all nicely weathered up as well. So time to shut up and let's get some weathering done. Now let's move along with the cockpit now after doing our pilots. Now first off, right, you know, a nice little start here is doing some chipping. We've got like these kind of sponges that come with aftermarket parts and stuff, always good to keep hold of these. You only need to just rip a little bit off. Now I always start with the chipping, right, because it's a silver, it can stand out quite a bit and come to the foreground quite a bit. So I start off with chipping because as we move along with things like our weathering, washes, pigments and stuff, it's going to dull it down a little bit, so it doesn't pop out at you too much. Right, so I've got here a nice colour. I always like to use things like Citadel kind of lead Belcher or their kind of silvers, depending on how bright you want it to come out. Lead Belcher is a nice sort of darkish kind of gunmetal kind of colour. Now it is nice and easy. We just sort of dip into our pot here, kitchen paper towel. You know, it's a bit like dry brushing, right? You know, you kind of just nicely sort of dab away most of it, and then we can just come in with our first piece, right, and we just start to dab it on just like so, trying to rotate the sponge as well so we don't kind of get like a uniform pattern sort of emerging. Right, maybe just like right in his seat, although we're going to have a pilot in here so we don't have to worry about this that much. And as you can see, nice little bit of chipping going on just there. We can also, if we really want to, we could take like little tiny pieces, get out you know, some sort of nice tweezers, right, and in very difficult areas we can just sort of dab this, and again get most of the paint off. Right, it's a little bit more trickier with sort of using tweezers, but the point is we've got like a tiny little bit on here and we can sort of get into maybe hard to reach places and add a little chip here and there into some hard reach places, all sorts of places like that. You can do exactly the same with, you know, your instrument display panels, right? A little bit of chipping here and there around the sides, right? When it comes to chipping though, I do advise that just do a little bit everywhere. Don't go too mad, because some models can look a bit off if they're just absolutely covered in chipping, right? Go over everywhere lightly and then build it up slowly, right? So a little bit more of a chip there, and I'm quite happy with the little bit of chipping we've done on that. You probably can't quite tell easily because it's a bit shiny, but that is basically chipping. You know, this is the cockpit. We could go a little bit further with painting them on or using different colours, but I don't tend to go that far with cockpits. Maybe on the outside of the aircraft I would, but not in a cockpit. And that is all nicely ready for a wash. Now remember, we're going to be using these washes just here. These are Humbrol washes. I thought I'd try something a little bit different because I'm always using ammo or AK, but Humbrol do some. I have done a bit of playing around with them and they are a little bit on the strong side, so very much advisable that we put a gloss coat on. As you can see, it's looking a bit shiny. I've already put a nice gloss coat down. You could use intermediate Guzzi agent, but I find this is just the cockpit. It's kind of a little bit hidden away. Save your money a little bit, and I like to use the multi-surface wax floor cleaner, which is this stuff right here. On the Genesis Models forum, there's a big post on this about what names it's been under, where it's been branded and everything, because different countries call it different things. Nice big post on there. Pretty damn good stuff, and it lasts a long time. You get one bottle of these and it's like years worth of product, mega cheap. So make sure it's sprayed, because I say this stuff is that little bit more stronger than your average stuff, and it can eat into your paint if you don't have some sort of protection on there to lock in your base colors and allow it to be protected, as well as a nice gloss smoothie surface helps makes things like washes flow better. So the first colour wash we're going to use here is their dark grey wash, right? Really nice big tub, actually good value for money in a lot of ways. Now this is quite thick as well. I know with like things like Ammo and AK, you know, they do kind of sell you, you know, filters, they sell you washes, panel line washes, loads and loads of different things, but really it's the same damn ingredients, right? It's just at different levels of thickness and thinness, right? You know, a filter's like really thin to go down as a filter, a wash is a bit more thicker to go down as a wash. You know, it's one of them. They just kind of make it convenient for you. Whereas with Humbrol, you know, this is already quite thick, and it does mean that you kind of need to thin it down to how you want the wash to play, but it's the same thing. It's just you kind of put in a little bit of work in thinning it yourself. So it's a little bit thicker, so it's good to go straight away as a wash, but we can turn it into filters and panel line washes and all sorts of cool stuff. Now I'm going to be using their Humbrol enamel thinners. This is why I say it's a little bit strong. Their stuff is really kind, I mean, this enamel thinners, you know, you can use for their enamel paints and stuff. You know, this is why you need to put a good gloss coat down. Now because it is, I mean, we could go off on a palette and we can make our own little mixture, but what I like to do is to get the flow nicely going, right, we can dip into our straight into the enamel thinners, right? And what this will do is if we sort of maybe actually just paint this, say maybe on this first little section here, just paint it on as a nice straight up, let's just, you know, give a nice little film of this thinners, right, all on this area. What that's going to do now is going to make the area nice and wet. So if we come in with a little bit of our wash, right, it's just going to help things flow, right? So we can just start to touch areas, maybe get a bit more on my paintbrush, not too much. We can just start to touch areas, and it's just going to help everything flow. I mean, I know we've got like all these little rivets, so you know, instead of touching each one of these rivets, you know, I will tend to just maybe brush across them. If you feel like you need a little bit of thinners, you know, because maybe it's not sort of flowing, you know, just kind of add a little bit on there. And really you'll just find that, you know, you can mix this on your paintbrush without kind of going off and having palettes and all this and making your own mixtures and stuff. I do like personally just to kind of mix it on the paintbrush and just put it straight on the model, and all I'm doing is just kind of literally just getting this in all the areas, you know. And because we've got that nice bit of enamel thinners just down all over, it's just helping everything to flow. And all I'm doing is kind of just trying to just move this paint around into all these areas and making sure I get all the nice little rivets so it goes into the rivets, right? And you know, for that first little section, hopefully you can see we've pretty much got our wash just nicely in all our little raised areas, detailed areas. So what you could do at this stage is a first little bit of a clean up. So this is where really you want to sort of clean your paintbrush off. So, you know, dipping it into the enamel thinners, got a kitchen paper towel here, just getting it just nice and clean. Yeah, so with that all nice and clean, we can just have one final sort of dip, making sure our paintbrush is a bit damp, and just like, you know, just start maybe sort of like on the flat areas, we could just clean up a little bit of the big bits, right? I mean, we want to sort of wait for this to dry before we do the proper full cleanup, but you know, it doesn't hurt just to a quick sort of, you know, all we've seen like it's pooled up somewhere, you know, just soaking it up, keeping your paintbrush clean, right? A little bit of a bit there, just clean that up. Right, but you know, let's not go overboard, right? It's best if you'd sort of let it dry. It was just kind of like any sort of big bits, get that cleaned up. And as you can see for that first little bit there, we've brought out that detail quite nicely. But let's leave it to dry, and once it's dry, we can have a final last little cleanup. Now this is all dry, let's take a closer look. Now if we take a closer look, what we can sort of see is things like watermarks, where it's sort of stayed on the surface and you've got like little watermarks. You can sort of see them a little bit here and there, right? Especially noticeable here. We want to get rid of that kind of stuff. Now there is sort of two ways of going about this. What we've got to kind of remember is we've kind of put this all over, and if we get, say, a nice clean piece here and compare the colours, right, hopefully you can see basically the colour has changed, right? It's kind of put a filter on as well as a wash at the same sort of time. If you want it to be really nice and grubby, maybe you want to do sort of like the stubbing it down technique. So what we do here, we just get out pure thinners and we clean these areas up. So we dip into our Humbrol enamel thinners, right, and we just dab it on a kitchen paper towel, just so as the brush is sort of nice and damp, right? And what we're going to do here is we're just going to now just stub this down, right? All we're doing is sort of reactivating that enamel paint, right? And we're just sort of targeting that surface, right? And we're just dabbing at it, and all we're doing is, hopefully as you can see there, we've now removed that sort of watermark and cleaned it up, but we've technically not removed it. We've just stubbed it down and blended it in and feathered it in, so we're kind of keeping that sort of colour, that kind of bit of a filter that's on there if you want it to look a little bit more grubby, and just sort of work your way around all the flat surfaces, cleaning it up, stubbing it down. There is another way you can go about it, and that's where we get out a cotton wool bud, and this is where we sort of clean it up, alright? And what we do, cotton wool bud into our enamel thinners, and we roll it on a kitchen paper towel, again making it damp. We don't want to blast on a load of thinners on here because it just will spread out and we can end up getting watermarks again. So we've got an area down sort of here again. This needs sort of cleaning up a little bit, and what we can do is just sort of like rub across it like so, right? And what we're doing, if we just quickly sort of rub across it, we're actually just cleaning up what's on the surface, right? We don't want to stick around too long, because if we stick around too long we might actually rub away what's in all the recesses and around all the detail, and what we just end up doing, as you can see, it's going on to the cotton wool bud, right? So it just gives us a cleaner surface, makes it all nice and tidy, but it just leaves behind what's in all those recesses and raised areas and detailed areas, and just really sort of shows that off, rather than over here is probably looking a little bit dirty sort of all round. Depends what you want to go for. Now normally this takes about maybe sort of 15 to 20 minutes for it to dry before you do this stage. Just keep in mind that if you apply the wash and you say leave it say a day or two, it can start to cure, and when it sort of cures, this stage of cleaning it up and rehydrating the enamel can be a lot harder. So you do want to sort of maybe in the first 20 minutes be cleaning it up. Don't leave it overnight. And this is all good due to putting like a gloss coat on, using acrylics and enamels, right? We've sprayed this with acrylic paints, we've sprayed this with a water-based gloss, and then we've used enamel products for the weathering, and we're able to sort of use thinners and thin things and feather things in, because acrylics and that are water based, and enamels, right, so they're enamel based, and it's like an oil to water situation going on here. They don't like to mix, which is why we can mess about with them. So this is where you got to keep this in mind, that you know, if you like to use enamel paints to spray on your models, you kind of want to use sort of water-based weathering products on top, right? If you use enamel paint spraying on this and then you use enamel-based weathering products, you're going to just eat right into that work, right? You could still use enamel paints if you do like using enamel paints, but you want to seal it in with some sort of a water-based gloss so that you don't eat into your enamel product. Just kind of, you know, make sure you're doing the opposite with paint, so as you don't have that mix going on. And basically we do that all over. Now when it comes to things like our instrument display panels, we've got to play things a little bit differently. Now we've got to play it differently because our dark wash here, you know, it's a nice sort of dark grey, but it's a bit of a dark colour for something that is black. We want to have a light colour. When it comes to weathering, things like black and dark things, you know, you start using light coloured sort of weathering products. So I'm going to come in with a bit of this dust wash, which, by the way, I mean, when these things do sit, they do sediment at the bottom, so you got to give them a good shake. Now this is sort of like a nice colour, but as I say, I'm using the Humbrol colours. I know aka and Enamel, they just have loads and loads of colours to choose from, so sadly, because Humbrol doesn't have a massive range of washes, we're going to have to come along and do a little bit of mixing, which isn't a big deal. Right, so I'm just going to make sure this is nice and mixed. So what we're going to do is take a little palette. Yeah, we're going to have to get a palette this time, right, and we're just going to mix these. Right, we're going to start off with maybe like a 50-50 mix and just see how we feel. I like to make sure that I get quite a bit of a wash mixture made up when I'm mixing stuff. Right, you don't want to be going off and sort of get halfway through your model and run out of the colour you've mixed, and then you got to mix the colour again, and you got to try and get it the exact colour that you've just made. So I always like to make a nice little, quite a good batch that's going to do more than needed. Right, so just clean my paintbrush off here before I start dipping in. Right, and I'm just going to mix this in and see what we get. Right, so that's still looking quite dark, so 1 spoonful of that dark grey is probably all we're gonna need. So we're gonna come back in, because I want this to be light, as I say, almost, you know, really kind of close to this colour really. So I've kind of got this nicely looking, you know, our sort of, what was it again, our dust wash, but with that nice bit of grey in there, right? You really don't need a lot of the dark grey, but you want to sort of test it first, because I mean, we've got to see how this is going to look on the black. We want it to look like a nice, pretty good wash on there. So again, I'm just going to dip in to our thinners, and I'm just going to sort of plaster the area nicely. That's way too much, but you know, we'll suck it up. We'll just, on a kitchen paper towel, just make our brush nice and dry. We can suck up most of this. Right, I mean, I could do some locking tweezers actually, just to hold this into place. So I'll just grab a little section of that. There we go. So we've got our instrument display panel. We've sort of give it a nice film of our wash, so as this is going to flow so nicely on here. So let's just see what our wash does. I'm dipping into our wash, and let's just see. Yeah, that looks quite cool. There we go. As you can see, that is going to give us a nice colour. And as you see, I can just sort of pretty much just blast this all over, knowing that I'm going to be able to clean it up later. Right, and once we've sort of got, again, it all sort of over, let's just try and suck up, you know, sort of a lot of the wash, sort of try and suck up a nice bit without sort of removing it from detail too much. But let's get up most of it. But it's still wet, so we don't want to do, you only want to get the big bits up, so you want to sort of now let that dry a little. Actually no, sorry, there was one big thing that we wanted to do. Actually, this is quite crucial and quite important. Getting out, say, a smaller paintbrush, right, sort of nice and dry. What we want to do is, what I almost forgot, was all our instrument display panels, they've kind of got a bit of wash inside them. Now we've done all that work painting them and everything, so what we want to do is just come in, got some on the end of my paintbrush there, come in and just start to suck up inside these instrument display panels, so as we're not covering up all this lovely detail we've spent all this time doing. So I'm just sort of sucking it up, making sure my paintbrush is dry, moving along to the next one, right, so we get all that detail come back through and it's not being covered up by the wash. And we want to make sure we get all that up before it dries. I mean, it doesn't matter if it does really, we can use a wash to reactivate it as I've already shown you, but now is a good time to just suck them all up and get all our dials showing up again. So there's our instrument display panel with some nice weathering on there, just bringing out that detail and just making sure that, you know, you soak up that wash in those dials so that you keep all your nice dial detail. Now sadly we've come to the end of episode 4. I did want to kind of move along with pigments, but we ran out of time sadly. So hopefully next episode, episode 5, you know, we're going to be jumping into doing some pigments to finalize sort of those last bits on the cockpit, you know, putting down matte coats and all sorts of things to do with the dials and stuff, and bring that detail out as well, and hopefully start bringing all the pieces together. So hopefully you've enjoyed this episode, and hopefully you're going to be looking forward to the next episode. But as always, until next time, my name is Boy Waldron's Genesis Models, and I'll catch you in the next episode.